fancy Hawaiian surf trunks.
Oh, Barbie, those were vintage. It's okay. All right, go ahead. Rip them. I don't care. They're a dime a dozen.
This is the second part of a 3-part series, so if you haven't watched the first video, go and watch that now. Please subscribe for more videos, and this is where I would put my sponsorship.
If I had one!
So instead of all of that, let's just jump into the video. And thanks for watching. Every time I watch WALL-E, I go into it thinking the same thing, which is that I'm not gonna like the movie, or that it's not as good as I thought it was. And every time I finish the film, I always come to the same conclusion, which is that this film is fantastic. It's one of the best love stories out there. And not a love story in the sense that it's just about WALL-E and Eve. Yes, they do have a relationship throughout the film, but it's also a love story for humanity and saving the Earth. It's showing off this dystopian universe that during the film we laugh at. You know, everyone's fat and lazy, you know, no one walks around, they're all on these hover chairs, and we laugh at them. Or we think it's goofy. But if you think about it, it's really a disturbing thought. Messing up Earth so bad that you have to leave in a spaceship for 700 years before you can even return. And the thought that I had while watching it was, is it even worth it? Because in the end, yes, it is worth it. They are humans, Earth was once their home. But my thought was also that they're so far removed from being on Earth. You know, how many generations have just lived on this spaceship, which is all they know? Not even the captain knew anything about Earth. He had to ask the computer to define it, you know, tell him all about the cultures and customs. And if they didn't have these robots to help them when they get back, which is what we see at the end of the film, I don't know if it would be worth it. And I really like the message that the movie brings about fighting back against big monopolies and saving the planet, which is ironic coming from Pixar since they are owned by Disney, but, you know, that's besides the point. Even the captain starts asking these questions when he sees Eve's recording where there's no blue sky or grass, and, you know, he's like, where is everything? Why is Earth so desolate and bare? The idea that saving the planet and taking care of your community is not just put on one person like the captain. Everyone has to come together as a community and help out. Getting away from the message of the film, I also want to talk about WALL-E and Eve and also the cinematography in this. Because this is Pixar's most beautiful film. I don't know how else to put it. It's just the shots in this movie are amazing. And it doesn't have to be the most beautiful shot ever, where WALL-E's on the back of a spaceship with his hand going through stars. No, it can be something simple like the camera work, where the camera zooms in and focuses on WALL-E as he's driving along the road, like someone's watching him or filming him. It's just so unique from other Pixar movies. The camera in this really focuses on perspective. You know, two people could be in the same shot, but one's out of focus, and it moves back and forth between the two. And that's just one reason why I think WALL-E stands out amongst the crowd of Pixar movies. And the other reason is that the film is very silent. I guess it depends on how you define dialogue. You know, Eve and WALL-E do make sounds and do communicate, but they're not having full-on conversations. You know, they're just saying very simple phrases or words. And if you don't count that, then the first human to talk, what is it, like a third of the way through the movie? Not counting the president at the beginning? For the first third or half of the movie, it's silent storytelling, which I think is pretty bold of a Pixar movie because it is targeted towards kids. Yes, parents come and watch it with them, but it really relies on the fact that children can understand and comprehend what is happening without dialogue explaining everything. And I kind of wish more children's films did that. You know, there are some hidden gems every once in a while, but I feel like, especially nowadays, everything is so dumbed down almost, where they rely on cheesy jokes or, you know, the easy stuff. When in reality, you can make a children's film much more complicated or, you know, have at least unique styles like no dialogue, and they'll still be able to understand it. How do we know that WALL-E's clumsy around Eve or that he's timid? Because he never says it in the movie. There's no dialogue that ever explains that he's scared. It's through his actions we see him mess up around Eve. We see that he organizes his home and that he's very good at his job. And how do we know that? Is it because WALL-E says to the audience that I'm good at my job? No, it's because there's a million skyscrapers that he's doing by himself. And to go along with that, we also see how lonely he is because of the other WALL-E robots that are no longer working and broken. His only friend in this entire world is this tiny cockroach. And so when a spaceship comes and Eve comes, it's a really big deal. He doesn't know how to exactly act around her. And even though Eve tried to kill him and that she is very destructive, Wally still cares about her, going as far as protecting her and trying to bring her back to life after she goes into hibernation mode with the plant. And even with the comedy too, the movie's hilarious without having to say anything. I think it really shows how strong of a storyteller Pixar is. Because let's say you went up to someone, it doesn't even have to be a kid, it can be an adult, and say, hey, do you want to sit down and watch this silent film? They'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. Why would I do that? I can go watch a regular movie. But then once you put a cute robot in as the main character, then they're like, oh, okay, this is interesting, let me watch it. The only thing bad about this movie to me is that it seems to drag about an hour in after Wally is saved from space. And they're going on like the covert stealth mission, trying to get up to the captain's room. And I'm not sure why, just for me it seems to drag, maybe because the rest of the movie is so good and well thought out. And even though it is building towards the climax, I feel like it didn't do as good of a job as it could have. But I do really like how Otto, the antagonist of the movie, isn't really that bad of a character. It's not that he's going out of his way to be an evil person, it's that he's programmed to do this because of an order. And as a robot, he's meant to follow orders, so it creates an interesting dynamic where he received an order from the president to never go back to Earth, but at the same time the captain is telling him that they have to go back, and that's the conflict. So overall, fantastic movie. I love the relationship between Wally and Eve, love the message that it brings, also the end credits scene where they're going throughout history with different art forms. I love that. Wally is adorable and he brings so much personality without having to say anything. For me, it's a 9 out of 10. I could give it a 10 out of 10. I think a lot of people might give it a 10 out of 10. And it may very well deserve it, but I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 just because of the one part where I think it drags. Other than that, perfect movie.
Is there nothing he cannot do? Yes, as
If I'm being completely frank, Up is a weird movie. The characters are weird, the plot is weird, the setting is weird. Everything about it is very strange. However, it's also Pixar's probably most creative film. Looking at their other films, I feel like I have some semblance of this is how they came up with the idea. Toy Story, what if toys came to life when you weren't around? A Bug's Life and Finding Nemo, which is exploring the life of animals. Monsters Inc., what if the monster in your closet was real? The Incredibles is just a superhero story. Cars, people look at the front of cars and they see a face, so, they made it into a real thing. All these movies are very understandable. Even Ratatouille I feel like is more understandable than Up. Because Up is about an old man who puts balloons on the top of his house to fly to South America. And I don't know how they came up with that idea. Don't get me wrong, it's brilliant, but I just love the thought process behind it. The issue that I have with this movie is pretty much identical to my issue with Finding Nemo. In Finding Nemo, Marlin is a very annoying main character to have. He's bitter, angry, yells, not very fun to watch. And Carl is the same in this movie. We spend the first 10 minutes watching him and Ellie grow up together and get married, their relationship. And Carl seems like a very shy, sweet man. And I understand that his wife dies and that the city's trying to buy his house from him to make, more buildings and construction. But he's just such an asshole to everyone. And we don't even have to talk about the construction crew or the city. Because the way he treats Russell, even when he first meets him, he's just an asshole and he's rude. Which is odd for a man who spent his entire adult career working with children. Like his first instinct when he sees Russell standing on the porch is to not let him in. Yeah, he does come around and let him in, but still, it's like his initial reaction is no.
no. All right, you can come.
However, what's nice about him and the difference between Carl and Marlin is that Carl at the end truly becomes a nicer man. He's there for Russell and spends time with him, becomes a father figure. And Marlin really wasn't the same. If Finding Nemo was a standalone film, then yeah, I'd say Marlin does change. However, we have Finding Dory, in which Marlin pretty much acts the same as he did in the first movie. he does relearn to let go and act more like Dory to get him out of situations, but throughout the film, he just goes back to his old self of being worried and not trusting anyone. So it's like, what was the first movie even for? And I know people bring up the fact that Carl and Charles Muntz are practically the same age in this movie as adults, but I saw a tweet that said Carl was 9 at the beginning of the film while Muntz is 23, so it's not that far-fetched having a 14-year time gap and having them both be old men. And since we're on topic, I guess we'll talk about Muntz. He's a very realistic person. You know, I could see someone going to South America to go prove that this bird is real, and slowly over time, he just gets crazier and crazier, where at the end, he just thinks everyone is out to steal what's his. Everyone's an enemy to him, no one is there to help him. So as a person, I'd say he has good character, but as a villain, I think he's pretty forgettable. I think what Muntz represents is more memorable as a villain, where it's not him as a person, it's his dogs, it's the blimp, it's trying to find Kevin. You know, all these things seem much bigger than Muntz himself. And he gets overshadowed very easily in this movie. You have Russell, who's very funny, Kevin, who acts very chaotic, and talking dogs, which on their own just bring a lot more character and depth to the story. And they stand out a lot more. I mean, Muntz is just a guy, while you have talking dogs with their own personalities. Of course he's going to be overshadowed. And I think out of all the Pixar villains and antagonists, he has the worst death. I mean, I'm afraid of heights, so watching the end blimp scene of them rolling around and fighting, I'm just like going crazy. And the idea of just falling to your death from that height is just, this is so bad. And as mentioned before, there is Russell, Doug, and Kevin, who are all comic relief characters. It's interesting that they felt the need to put 3 of them in this movie, you know, all together. But I think it does work out. They do balance the characters nicely, and one doesn't just get all the screen time over the others. And the most famous part about this movie is the opening. Everyone talks about how sad it is and how much they cry during it. And I'm not denying that it's sad, because it is. However, I think towards the end, when Carl is sitting at Paradise Falls and reads Ellie's adventure book, is a lot sadder, and it makes me cry every single time. And it's not even crying because it's sad, it's that it's happy. You know, you see all these happy memories, and it just brings a rush of emotions. So I love the message about not being stuck in your past and trying new things and going to have your own adventure. Overall, I'd give like a 7.5 or 8 out of 10. I love the story, it has some great moments, but I think it relies too much on common tropes and cheesy dialogue and jokes.
He made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel! My master is good and smart.
Like introducing Kevin and Doug, who aren't there to have meaningful story. Like Russell, he has a meaningful story and background, but they're just there to make you laugh and act sporadically. It's a lot different from the comedy in WALL-E, which I thought was a lot more well thought out and mature for kids. So yeah, go slap on a YouTube video of the opening if you want to cry.
Wow, this is great! You should try this, Mr. Fredrickson. Look, there's a bus that could take me home 2 blocks away. Hey, I can see your house from here.
Don't check around so much, kid.
Ah!
Now, who lied to me and said Toy Story 3 was a bad movie? Because I remember seeing this one as a kid, and the general consensus that I got as I was growing up and throughout the years was that people didn't like this one. Now, it's possible that it was just because it was new and people don't like new things. People have a hard time digesting things, and after an 11-year gap, Toy Story 3 comes out, and people have their expectations high. And after rewatching the movie, I came to the conclusion that this is an amazing movie. While doing a bit of research online, I saw that Toy Story was ranked at the top, while Toy Story 3 was next and Toy Story 2 at the bottom. Toy Story 4 we'll talk about later. But I couldn't disagree more. Toy Story 2 is the pinnacle of Pixar, and then Toy Story 3, and then the first one. The third one is even close to beating out number 2. It doesn't do it, it doesn't quite get there, but it comes close. As usual, the story's the same. Woody's trying to get back home to his owner, while the other toys want to stay at daycare because they felt like they've outgrown Andy. They've outgrown their usefulness. And what I like about this conflict is that both sides are right, but for the wrong reasons. See, the group, Buzz, Jesse, Rex, Mr. Potato Head, they're right for wanting to leave Andy, because he doesn't need them anymore, he's outgrown them. And they want kids who are going to play with them, they want to be at daycare. But they're wrong in the sense that Andy was not trying to throw them away, he did want to keep them and put them in the attic. Woody, on the other hand, is also right for wanting to stay with Andy and be loyal to him. He knew they were trying to be put in the attic, and they are his toys, so they should stay with him. But he is being delusional, trying to believe that Andy still wants them. Yes, he was trying to put them in the attic, but at the same time, he's growing up. Woody doesn't want to believe that he's growing up, or that he's outlived his usefulness. To Woody, everyone else is being selfish, but to the group, they're doing what they perceive as right. It's their only option at this point. And it's fun to see how the daycare turns into a place where kids play with toys to a prison. Slowly coming to terms and realizing the fate that comes to toys in the daycare center. If you're with the little kids, well then they're gonna play rough with you and fuck you up. It's a typical prison heist and breakout story. And that's every Toy Story movie. I mean, they're always trying to break out of somewhere, whether it's Sid's house or Elle's house. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're always trying to break out of somewhere, but it's nice to see in this one more personality and the group coming together and working together. Sure, in the second one you had Buzz in the group going to save Woody, but it was more Buzz leading them, and not actual problem solving, but more like we have to do this, then this, then this. Well, in the third one, it's more of a community. You see them all working together and having different emotions about what's happening. Not everyone is treated the same way. Buzz is the enemy. Barbie gets to live the high life, but she chooses to go with her friends. And Woody, for once, is not the one being saved. He's the one going to save them. And a side note really quick, I found this interesting. When they first get to the daycare, there's that car telephone thing bumping into Woody's leg. And they just kind of brush it off, but later when Woody comes back, the car tells him what a terrible place this is and everything that happens here. Which, looking back on it now, I realized that at the beginning, he was trying to warn Woody and the group, telling them to get out of there while they still can, but they didn't pick up the phone. So let's talk about the man behind the torment, Lotso. Lotso is a very good villain, his motives are clear, and he takes gaslighting to a whole new level.
She don't love you no more. Now come on! What? You want your mommy back? She never loved you. Don't be such a baby!
And because of him and his group, we get a lot of personality at Sunny's side, which we never got at Andy's house. Andy's room and the house in general was just always bare, never really explored it or anything. But Sunny's side had its own personality to it. There's a community going on. You see the disparity between the rich, powerful, and privileged, and then the low-class, abused toys. I do think this movie was a fitting end for Toy Story. Even though they went on to make Toy Story 4, I think if they wrapped it up at the trilogy, it would have been perfect. I know people have their issues with the fourth one, and I'll get into that later on when I make that video. But if it was just this trilogy, I'd say it was a perfect trilogy. The movie wraps up nicely with Andy giving his toys away and coming to terms with growing up. While at the same time the toys, especially Woody, learn to give up as well, learn to let Andy go and be with their new owner, Bonnie. One thing that I read, and I do agree with, is that the writers never seem to know what to do with Buzz's character. It's either that he's this space ranger who's delusional, or in this third one they have him reset to be another space ranger again, or even Spanish mode.
Bitácora espacial. Me he despertado del hipersueño en un planeta extraño.
I think the second one came the closest to giving Buzz a unique personality and his own story going on, but they just kind of missed it in all the movies, especially the fourth one. So yeah, I'd give it like a 9 out of 10. It's almost perfect. There are a small change I would make to Buzz's character and the way he acts throughout the film, but I think it's pretty much perfect, and it gives Toy Story 2 a run for its money.
This is so weird. He's packing up. Uh-oh. Oh, here comes Buster. Out of the way! Get away!
Cars 2, or as it should have been called, Mater the Movie, 007. These past movies have been killing it with ratings. I mean, 10 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, 8 out of 10s. They're all great. And then Cars 2 comes along, kinda drops the ball. Spoiler alert, this is Pixar's worst movie. Get rid of any idea of what you have about a bad Pixar movie, whether it's Monsters University or The Good Dinosaur, it doesn't matter. Luca, Soul, all of those movies, way better than Cars 2. And the problem is right at the beginning. Because who do we see at the beginning? Is it Lightning McQueen? Is it Mater? No, it's Finn McMissile, someone we've never met before. We're watching him go on a spy mission that you don't even know what's happening. Things are just going off, there's ropes going everywhere, explosions. What's happening? Did I accidentally walk into the wrong theater? Is this Casino Royale? I thought I was watching Cars, a racing movie. No, but seriously, you know how Fast and Furious went from being a racing movie to spy movies, and in the span of like 8 films? Well, Cars did that in 2 films. I talked about how much I love the first Cars in my previous video, and to quickly summarize, I love Lightning McQueen's character arc throughout the film, going from arrogant to a really caring person. And not in an artificial way, you really see him follow through on his promises. He's one of the most interesting characters in the Pixar franchise. Radiator Springs has such a unique cast of characters like Doc Hudson, whose story is sad and emotional and helps McQueen overcome his arrogance. You have Mater and Sally, who both form close relationships with McQueen and are really there by his side. And it's just a nice story of choosing friends over fame and fortune. And then Cars 2 comes along, crumples that into a ball, and tosses it into a bin. For some reason, they felt the need to change Mater's character. In the first movie, Mater was very confident with himself. He didn't change for anyone. He showed McQueen different tips and tricks, and never shied away from being himself. But then in Cars 2, they have Mater question himself. He starts doubting himself, messing up. And it just completely changes what you know about him. Yes, Mater may not be the smartest car out there, but in the first one, he never got in the way. He never messed up so badly like McQueen did. But in the second one, he's just a buffoon who can't do anything right, and anything he touches, it just explodes. But even that itself is fine. If they want to explore Mater and his character, that's fine. But I don't know why they felt the need to make it a spy movie. Because getting rid of the opening scene of the spy stuff, the film makes you believe that it's going to be about racing. McQueen is going to the World Grand Prix where he's going to race 3 events, and it's going to be with this new environmentally friendly fuel. Now the fuel part is whatever, because it kind of just sets up the spy shit, although I will say it is kind of interesting. But racing the World Grand Prix is interesting in itself. I want to see Lightning McQueen win the race. I want to see him compete in 3 different events and win. That's why I'm watching Cars. It's because they're cars and they race. But no, for some reason they felt the need to make this a spy movie. And at first it's not so bad. It goes back and forth between the race and Mater doing spy stuff. But then later on in the movie it just focuses on Mater and just completely ignores McQueen. And I know it takes a lot of prep and planning to make a Pixar movie, but after the first one came out, they had a lot of shorts of Mater, and I'm sure he sold a lot of merchandise as well. So I think they really went hard into Mater on this movie to sell more merchandise. They knew people liked him and his character, so they made the whole movie about him and just ignored McQueen. And there were 2 thoughts going through my mind while watching this movie. The first one was that I wish this spy stuff wasn't happening. And 2, if it has to be about spies, at least make it interesting. There was no tension at all. I didn't care who the person was behind the fuel. I just wanted to see McQueen race. And that's not just me saying it. I mean, look at Cars 3. Cars 3 is a great movie. And why is it so great? Well, it's because they go back to racing. It goes back to the roots of the movie. And can I just say, this movie gets very liberal with how cars move and the use of their tires. Well, in the first one, they did move around and like kind of grab things with their tire and move things around. But in this one, it's like kind of extreme how far they can move their tires. It's seriously at the point of them almost having an arm and a hand. Other than that, I don't know what else to say. I don't remember much from this movie. I kind of just, blocked it from my memory. And if I was doing a rewatch of the Cars franchise, I would just do Cars 1 and 3. I appreciate that they tried something new and tried to implement a spy story into the whole racing thing, but it just didn't work out. I mean, I'd give it like a 4 out of 10, honestly. This movie is really bad. Brave is the most forgotten Pixar movie, right next to The Good Dinosaur. And I don't think it's because people forget this movie exists, I think it's because they forget Pixar made it. It's their one and only princess movie, and you could be mistaken to believe this is along the same lines as Tangled or Moana or Encanto. But nope, it's Pixar. And I've actually never seen this movie the full way through. I think I've only seen half of it before, so this was pretty much my first time ever watching it. If you want to know how little I knew about this movie, I had no clue that the mom turned into the bear. That being said, when I finished the movie, I thought it was above average. I didn't think it was bad at all. But one thing I didn't like about it is how it's basically an argument throughout the whole film. You know, it's the typical story about my parents not listening to me, my child is not listening to me, and the conflict that comes because of it. You know, think like Freaky Friday. And I'm not sure if pacing's the problem with this movie or just the lack of ideas. It's about halfway through the movie when Eleanor first turns into the bear. And they spend about 10 minutes getting out of the castle. Then they go and meet the witch, that lasts a few minutes, and then they spend another 10 minutes just surviving and outside. And I know it shows, I'm gonna do my best to pronounce this name because I really struggle saying it. Mérida. You know, the main character, I can't pronounce her name. But I know it's supposed to show the bond forming between her and Eleanor, and it doesn't really do it for me. It just seems like Mérida is good at hunting and teaches her mom how to survive out in the wild and shows her that I do have these skills to survive in life. If you allow me to be my own person, I can successfully do that, but I don't want to be a princess how you want me to be. And then 10 minutes later, Mérida's giving a speech to everyone about the exact same thing, about how children should be their own person instead of what their parents want them to be. And the reason why this is weird is because Eleanor has only been a bear for 20 minutes and half of that was getting out of the castle as a bear. It just seems like they barely spent any time together, like really getting each other's perspective on things. And the movie seems to care more about Eleanor turning back into a bear rather than Mérida and Eleanor coming to an understanding together. I know they only have a day to turn her back, or 2 days or something, whatever it was. But they only seem to focus on that rather than their relationship building throughout the film. And I think it's because they spend such little time on their relationship of her as the bear and Mérida trying to protect and save her. To be fair though, it does come around the end when Eleanor becomes her own person and protects Mérida from Mor'du. And they do kind of lose out on the comedy aspect. There was a lot of funny moments at the beginning with Fergus, but since he's not in the whole thing and it focuses more on the mother-daughter relationship, there's not a lot of funny interactions that happen. And yeah, I do hold comedy against Pixar movies because they're known for that. They're known for being good stories, but also having a lot of funny moments. And if they lack on that, I think it really comes through as a poor script. I'm not saying Brave is bad, I think it's just an average movie. I think it's a typical story. It's done in a creative way, which is expected of Pixar. But I can't just help thinking that there could be something more, that we missed out on part of the movie. I want to see more Mérida and Eleanor get into situations together and how they deal with it, rather than, oh, here's a time limit of 2 days, and they're just, out in the wild for the whole time doing nothing. Overall, I'd give it a 7 out of 10 for being average, but that doesn't mean I think it's bad. I wouldn't mind watching this if it was on. But I definitely would choose other Pixar movies before this one.
A princess does not place her weapons on the table.
Mom, it's just my bow.
Monsters University suffers the same fate that Toy Story 3 did. When I saw it in theaters, I came to the same conclusion that many people had about Toy Story 3. That it wasn't good, nothing can top the original, and they shouldn't have made it. However, on my rewatch, I found that it was actually pretty delightful. It doesn't top the original at all, but it's not a bad movie. I talked in the previous video about how Monsters Inc. is my favorite Pixar movie, and the reason for that is that the movie's hilarious. Billy Crystal's portrayal as Mike Wazowski is hilarious, and any line he says, I just can't help but laugh.
Wasting your time. We need a new team.
We can't just get a new team. I checked this morning. It's against the rules.
The comedy in Monsters University is different. They never really make any jokes or say anything funny. It's always just physical gags. It's the slug who's too slow to make it to class, or everyone in the fraternity just being a big goofball and clumsy. And overall, it's just people getting hurt that it's meant to make you laugh. And another thing that I didn't care for, and it's not even that I don't like it, it's just kind of cliche, it's the whole university and college experience. It's the story about the losers versus the jocks, the fraternity against fraternities. And these types of stories get rehashed so much, just like any other cliche, because they work, because people like them. And while it was enjoyable seeing Monsters University and all the monsters come together to, go to scare class or go on different career paths, I would have much rather preferred a sequel rather than a prequel. It kind of goes back to the same thing I said about Cars 2 and Mater, where in the first Cars, Mater was already confident with himself and they didn't really need to go on a whole character journey for him. The same applies here, because in Monsters Inc., Mike doesn't try to be scary. He knows he's not scary. And at the end, when they get rid of scaring, well then it's his turn to step in for comedy. And yes, Monsters University does play into the notion that Mike understands that he's not scary and comes to that realization and acceptance, but did we need a whole movie for it? And it's really hard to try to not compare it to the original movie. With Toy Story 3 or 2, I feel like they can stand on their own. It's easy to talk about them as their own story and plotline going on. But with Monsters University, it just seems I'm always thinking about the original movie and wanting to watch that instead. In fact, for me, the most interesting part of the movie was at the credits scene when you see them rise up into the ranks into being on the scare floor. And it's probably just because it's something familiar for the audience. And to add on top of that, the other interesting moment in this movie is when Mike goes into the cabin in the woods to try to scare the girls, and Sully comes in after him. The reason I love this so much is because you get a glimpse of who they're going to be in the next movie. They're not just some college kids who want to win the game. In that moment on the beach, you see their true personalities come through, where they say their fears and worries. And it's very reminiscent of their characters in Monsters Inc. Mike really reminds me of Hawkeye in that scene. And I know that sounds absurd and it doesn't make sense, but let me explain. So Mike talks about how he's not scary, how Sully can go on and be a Sullivan and everyone will love him for it, but if Mike tries and fails, they're all going to laugh at him. And the same goes for Hawkeye too. Hawkeye in the Avengers is just a regular dude. All he does is shoot a bow and arrow. And so these worries come through and he's the guy who can't miss. If he misses a shot with his bow and arrow, well, what good is he? The Hulk will always be the Hulk. He will always be able to turn big and smash things. Thor will always be a god. But Hawkeye is just a dude. And if he can't live up to what people think of him, well, he's worthless then. And this whole scene sets up the best moment in the film, which I think is the most memorable part. After finding out they can't get back, they have to scare the adults, which is something that no monster has done before because you can't scare adults. But Mike comes up with a plan, and you get that amazing moment when Sully comes down and scares the shit out of all the cops. And all the tanks in the monster world are starting to fill up because there's so much power coming through. I love that part. And it really makes me think, how would a Pixar horror movie go? I don't think they would ever make it, but it would be interesting to see Pixar explore other genres. Or even if there was a separate company from Pixar that did like adult animated stuff where it's like rated R, that'd be really fun to see. I think it's a great film if you just want lighthearted fun, but I don't think there's a lot of substance to it, so I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. It could have been better, but not terrible.
Scary feet, scary feet, scary feet. The kid's in the bathroom. Scary feet, scary feet, scary feet. Oh, he's back. Rah!
Inside Out was a huge movie when it first released. I remember how crazy people went over this, and that's not surprising. Their last original movie was Up, which came out in 2009, and there was Brave, but like I said before, a lot of people forgot about Brave. And so essentially we went 6 years without an original Pixar movie. I mean, all the others were just sequels or prequels. And so when this came out, people went bananas. The cinematography in this is beautiful, and I'd put it up there with Up as one of their most creative ideas, giving personalities to emotions and seeing what their world is like inside your head. It's something that everyone can relate to because everyone has emotions, and that's where Pixar really shines. But as creative as it is giving personalities to these different emotions, I think it also creates the issues that I had with this film. Because, okay, so we have joy and sadness who get sucked up and transported to long-term memory, okay? So what's left? We have disgust, fear, and anger left in Riley's mind. And I understand that the moods are their personality, so fear is very scared of everything, and anger is very angry and mad at everything, but do they not know how to control Riley at all? Is Joy the only one that can have Riley live a normal life? Joy's away for a few days, and they're already telling Riley to go run away. But they never really mention that at all. The message of the film is that it's okay to have different emotions. It's okay to be happy and sad together. You need to find a balance between the two and not just be one all the time. And we see the different character arcs. We see Joy coming to the understanding that sadness is necessary for Riley, as it is for everyone. But then disgust, anger, and fear, they're just themselves, and they don't know how to handle Riley without joy or sadness there, so where's the balance with them? They did have some funny gags throughout the movie, like with the gum commercial coming back.
What the? This again? Yard, our friends.
Triple and gum will make you smile.
Did I ask for the gum commercial?
This film gave me a revelation about storytelling in movies. So as I was watching this, there's obviously the story of Riley wanting to run away and go back to Minnesota, along with joy and sadness trying to get back to Riley's mind. And as these two plots were going on, I found myself thinking that I didn't care about Riley's story, for whatever reason it was. I just found it boring, perhaps, but I just thought, man, I don't care about these scenes of Riley running away. But then I took a step back and realized that caring about sadness and joy getting back to Riley is caring about Riley. All these emotions and what they're going through are Riley. This is all her. So if I care about joy and sadness getting back to her mind, then I care about Riley in turn running away. And it was almost like this strange Inception feeling that I got when I realized that. It just felt so meta to be like, oh, you care about her emotions rather than the person. But caring about her emotions is caring about the person. I also like how they deal with the idea of memories. It's almost similar to toys in Toy Story, where after a certain while, the owner gives the toys up. They outgrow them. They outlive their usefulness. And memories are the same way. Just look at Bing Bong. After Riley grows up, she begins to forget about him. He's not useful anymore to her. So he begins to fade. And it just makes you think back on yourself, like, what have I forgotten? What important things in my childhood or that were once important to me, what have I forgotten? Because I'm sure we all know the feeling of something sparking a memory in you that you forgot about, and it all comes rushing back in this wave of nostalgia and emotion. And apparently there's going to be an Inside Out 2, which will release in 2024, 9 years after the original film came out. Jeez, 9 years. God, that long. And I'm curious how they're going to set up a sequel to that. So overall, I love Inside Out. It makes you think back on your own life and your own childhood, forgotten memories. There's some sad moments like when Bing Bong dies. And I think it's an amazing adventure story. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Disgust, fear, and anger kind of pissed me off during the movie, and I really much prefer watching joy and sadness, but other than that, I think it's a phenomenal film.
Well, why don't we go down to the elephant lot and rent an elephant?
Hey, that sounds nice.
We're taking the bus, nitwit.
And last but not least, The Good Dinosaur, the film I think people don't even realize exists. Which is in part because when Inside Out came out, like I said, it was a huge deal, and The Good Dinosaur came out in the same year. I had no idea The Good Dinosaur is even a Pixar movie, let alone a movie, until like 3-4 years later. I'm not sure why they felt the need to release 2 Pixar movies in 1 year, but it obviously did not work, and this was a box office flop. And I can't entirely blame that just on Inside Out releasing at the same time, because the story isn't anything special. It's not bad by any means, it was actually better than I thought it was going to be. It's just strange. Pixar is known for making these creative decisions, but then they just make a story about dinosaurs, and that's it. There's nothing special or unique about them, or obscure, they're just dinosaurs that live their lives. It just seems like one of the most unnecessary stories, because what's the actual plot? Like, Arlo and Spot realizing their differences and coming together? Or I guess not wanting to be scared of trying new things, but it just seems so unnecessary that they even made this movie. Arlo as a protagonist doesn't draw me in at all. He's pretty bland, and he doesn't do anything throughout the film. He just kind of falls like every 5 seconds, and that's it. And there is him learning to let go at the end and stand up for himself, becoming a more mature person in general. but it's just hard to remember anything that happened in this movie. I know there was that scene when they got high off the fruit, and then there was like some pterodactyls that were mean, and some like T-Rexes, and that's pretty much all I can remember. And it's a shame because the film looks fantastic. The grass and water effects look so realistic, and I was blown away when I first saw it. I think if they gave it another go around, they can make the dinosaur concept work, but in this one it really didn't. And there's not much for me to say about it. Arlo, like I said, is not a good main character, and Spot is kind of reminiscent of Boo. You know, a child who doesn't really talk much, but they have to be protected. But he doesn't have a personality that really draws you in. You know, Boo is playful, she's sweet, she's caring. But then what is Spot? He's a survivor, he wants a family. I don't know, the whole movie is just so strange. I definitely think it's worth a watch if you haven't seen it, but it's not something I would watch again. Overall, I'd give it like a 5 out of 10, and I really think Pixar learned their lesson from this one. Because going forward, although the next movies are going to be more controversial, like Toy Story 4, Incredibles 2, Luca, Turning Red, they're all a lot better than people say. And if anything, I think it's nice that Pixar is trying to do new things while sticking to their creative roots. But let me know which Pixar movie's your favorite, what you think of my rankings, what would you rank them. Please subscribe, comment, like, and I'll see you guys in the next video.